Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Vav in Shevuot. We are in the first perek of Masechah Shavuos, and although our topic, of course, throughout this Masechet will mostly be Shavuot, making oaths, the first Mishnah noted four different kinds of topics that involve two that are four. And so as a result, even though most of this Masechet is going to talk about oaths, we have been talking about Sarat, the leprosy, the religious leprosy. It's not the traditional, Hansen's disease, but a really religious kind of affliction that people could have and become tameh. And we actually had it in this past week's Torah portion, which was both Tazria and Mitzorah, which both talk about Sarat. So we can call that a Daf Yomi coincidence if we're looking for such coincidences. And so let me share my screen and we'll get started with the background for today's class. So we're in the middle of discussing the different colors of white that can be tzarat. And they are ordered in their whiteness as follows. First is beharis, that is white like snow. Second is se'es, and we said that that is white like a new baby lamb's wool, and we'll say a little bit more about that today. Second, then we have something that is going to be secondary to beheret. That's like a lime colored, and then not a lime like the fruit, the lime, but lime as in the cement kind of lime that you put on the wall. And then secondary to se'es is the white that is the membrane of an egg. And so as a result, those are the four categories. And again, it's two that are four because you have beharis and se'es. Those are the two main categories. And then you have two secondary categories to them, namely kisid and kibetza, that like the egg. So those are the four. And in the first Mishnah in Maseches Negaim, we said that when calculating the size of an appearance, an av and a tolda combine, meaning that beheres would combine with the lime color, with the secondary to beheres, the tolda to it, and se'es combines with the secondary to se'es. So the interesting thing is there, and that's in order to figure out whether there's a minimum size, because you need at least a bean size stain, a bean size affliction. And if it's not, if the affliction is partially beheris white and partially lime white, and they're connected, so then you can add them together. If it's beheris white and se'es white, then we would not combine them together. So that's what the Mishnah in Negaim said. And so as a result, the Gemara said that the Mishnah there is not like Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says that instead of combining 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, he says, no, you can combine 4 with 3. You can combine 3 with 2. You can combine 2 with 1. But, but not, and that's it. And so as a result, he is saying something different. So the question is, where do we know that? How do we know that Rabbi Akiva says that what we focus on is just the ones that are next to each other and not like the Mishnah in the first Mishnah in Negaim, which says that you focus on 1 and 3 and 2 and 4? You look like you have a question.
No, I'm just pondering what you're saying.
All right. So now we're going to pick up in the middle of the 6th line. And again, the Gemara wants to know, how do we know that Rabbi Akiva allows such combinations, namely 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, but not presumably the expanded combinations? One can, by the way, at least it seems to me, I haven't thought through the ramifications, completely, but it does seem like one could also understand Rabbi Akiva as saying that all four of them combine, as we'll see. But it seems like the commentaries here focus on it's just 1 and 2, just 2 and 3, just 3 and 4, etc. So, okay. So, Behega Shamina Rabbi Akiva Zulu Malamizu. How do I know that Rabbi Akiva takes a position that colors 1 and 2 combine, 2 and 3 combine, 3 and 4 combine, and not the position of the Mishnah in Negayim that says 1 and 3 and 2 and 4? So, Ilema Mehad Tanya. So, first up thought is to say from the following Brisa, Rabbi Yossi says, Shal Yoshua beno Shal Rabbi Akiva. So the son Yoshua of Rabbi Akiva asked Rabbi Akiva, asked his father Rabbi Akiva, why does our Mishnah reference the fact that you have 2 items that are 4 items? Meaning, why does it specifically say that it's 2 that are 4? So Amar Lo Im Lav Ma Yomru. Well, what should it say? So Yomru Mikrum Beitza Vilamala Tameh. Well, it could just say that the egg membrane and everything that's whiter than it, that is all Tameh. And then you would know that everything combines, that everything, that it's all what you would know what is Tameh, and you would know how things combine. So Amar Lo Marsha Mitztarfin Zeim Zeh. Well, the point is that the idea is that they should combine with one another only in that order. So Amar Lo Vayomru Mikrum Beitza Vilamala Tame Umitzarfin Imzeh, that you could say, all right, so that let it say that everything from an egg membrane and more, and everything will combine one with another. So Amar Lo, so Lomar Lucha. Kol Kohen she'eno baki behen uvishmoseihen eno roa es nagam. It's to tell you that a Kohen, in order to make the evaluation, and there's a debate among the Rishonim whether it's specifically a Kohen or whether a non-Kohen can be standing next to the Kohen and tell the Kohen what to say. But in any event, we'll just focus on the Kohen at the moment, that the Kohen needs to actually be an expert and know what they are. And the knowledge needs to not just be on the nature of the whiteness, but also what they're called. That one is called Baheres, one is called Se'es, one is called Kisid, and one is called Kikrum Beitza. So the Ilu Misid. So now, how do I know that he doesn't say that it's only a combination of 1 and 3 and 2 and 4? Because the Ilu Misid Heichal Umilmala Lo Kamar. But Rabbi Yoshua, his son, does not say that it is, does not reference Krum Beitza and Sid, but rather just Krum Beitza. That implies that all the nature of the connection between Krum Beitza and the things that are more white than it is similar to the nature of the things that are Kisid and more white. And so as a result, it must be that Rabbi Akiva is saying that each one is adjacent and not that we combine 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. Because if they combined 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, then Rabbi Yoshua should have said, hey, Dad, why doesn't it say not just Mikrum Beitza Ulamala? It should have also said Misid Heichal, from this line that was in the Beit HaMikdash Ulamala, and more white than that, in order to tell you that it's 4 and 2 and 3 and 1. And that would be how you would need to phrase it. That is similar to how it gets phrased in the Mishnah in Negayim. So midulo amarle, from the fact that we didn't say that, shma mina de shmiya leila Rabbi Akiva de amar kula levade se'es mitztarfin, that everything combines, that 4 combines with 3, 3 combines with 2, 2 combines with 1. Not necessarily. So our first effort to try and prove that Rabbi Akiva says that it's 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 2 and 1, and not 4 with 2 and 3 with 1 is not going to work, because Vidilma Se'ef V'tol Dasa, Beheres V'tol Dasa. Maybe what Rabbi Yoshua actually said, and Rashi tells it very nicely, 1, 2, 3, 6 lines up in the widest lines at the bottom of Vav Amud Aleph. V'ildilmus eis v'toldasa, beheres v'toldasa. Shmiele. That is what Rabbi Yoshua actually said. V'hakinami kamerlei. And in fact, this is what he was saying to him. Yomru mikrom l'mala, misidu l'mala. That in fact, what should have been said, what could have been said, is that it was 4 and above and 3 and above, meaning that he's acknowledging that you combine 4 with 2 and 3 with 1, and 4 and 3 don't combine together. V'tanahu delo kapid lemikshav, and the l'mezel ki ruchla, and the Tana who taught this was not being, so detailed oriented, because he's not like a peddler who goes around peddling his stuff. This is a quote from elsewhere in the Gemara that with the idea that a Tana doesn't necessarily have to give us all the details, because we can figure things out on our own. And it's not like a peddler, because if a peddler's trying to sell something to you, you need to know what goods he has to sell. So he has to tell you everything in order for you to be able to decide whether you're going to buy. But that's not the way a Tana necessarily speaks. And so as a result, maybe in fact Rabbi Yoshua did say what he was did say from the Krum Beitza and Sid HaHeichal. So that is our first effort. Now, who is this Rabbi Yoshua ben Rabbi Akiva? So Rashi says, if we go up, now we're smack in the middle of the narrow lines of Rashi, Yoshua ben Nosho Rabbi Akiva, who Yoshua ben Karcha. That according to Rashi, this is Yoshua ben Karcha, that we see throughout Shas. But Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva was bald, and so as a result, his son was referred to as Yoshua, the son of the bald one. So Kida Amrinim Bechoros, as we will see eventually in Bechoros, Chutz min hakireach hazeh, except for this bald guy here, who was referring to Rabbi Akiva. Now, Tosos has a real problem with that. Not here, but elsewhere. Tosos, specifically in Bechoros, that disagrees, and he says, no, it's not, the Gemara would not refer to Rabbi Akiva in such a, not nice way, derogatory way, exactly, because apparently, not, somebody insulting somebody who has no hair is not a new thing, apparently. And so as a result, it says that they don't think so. They think that this is somebody else. And indeed, Tosfos offers proofs because of the ages of various people in other Gemaras. But in any event, that is an interesting aside point as to who this Rabbi Yoshua ben Rabbi Akiva is. Okay, but we've tried once to answer the question of how do we know that Rabbi Akiva says that you combine 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 2 and 1, and not 4 with 2 and 3 with 1, which is the only combinations that are allowed under the Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Negaim. So Elam midir Rabbi Yechanina. Maybe we can use Rabbi Chanina as the basis. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, because what does Rabbi Chanina say? Mashal de Rabbi Akiva lama davar domeh. What is the ruling that Rabbi Akiva has comparable to? And at least initially, it looks like we're going to think that this comparison is to the 4 colors of white that we've been talking about, Baheris, Se'es, etc. So what is it? He say, Arba kosos shel chav. It's like 4 cups of milk. Into the first cup, you had 2 drops of blood. And so as a result, it's pretty darn white, but not perfectly white like milk. And then you've got a cup with 4 drops of dam, 4 drops of blood. And one that has 8 drops of blood. And then there's the 4th cup. It either has 12 drops of blood or 16 drops of blood, meaning either you're adding 4 after the first 2, or you're adding or you're continuing the process of doubling. Shikulan maros lobenhain. All of them are a real white. You wouldn't say that any of them are red, and yet but they're each more intense one from the next. So doesn't this show that Rabbi Akiva says is focused on gradations? And so as a result, each one that's next to each other is considered the ones that you would combine. And so since we're talking about the four main whites, doesn't that show that Rabbi Akiva holds that the four whites are combined one with the next? Not necessarily. Aimer deshamat le Rabbi Akiva befasuch. No, these four categories are talking about a what is known as a mixed spot, because the Torah says, in addition to referring to Baheres and Se'es, it also says that there are some spots that are Adam Demes, that have a reddish hue to it. Exactly. And so when Rabbi Hanina is now saying these comparisons, he is not talking about the pure whites, and that's the Baheres and the Se'es that we've been talking about, but rather he's talking about the mixed whites, the whites that have a reddish hue to them. So b'chaluk mishamat. So maybe when it comes to the pure white, he's not also talking about that. So v'chi tema ki hechi deshamat le b'fasuk hachi shamat le b'chaluk. And if you want to say, hey, maybe Rabbi Akiva would treat the pure whites the same way he treats the whites that have the Adam Demet in it, that have the reddish hue. But one second, how do you know that maybe Rabbi Hanina's statement is not correct? Because listen to the following Mishnah. This is the second Mishnah in Maseches Nagayim. This and so it should be the Bach here, the Agosa Bach changes from V'hatanya V'hatanan, so to V'hatanan. So V'hatanan, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Adam Dam Shebazeh the If you have the different reddish kinds, Kiyayin Hamazuk B'mayim, it's like wine diluted with water. Ella shel Baheres azah kesheleg, except that the Baheres version is white like snow. The shel sid deha hemena, and the lime version, which is the Tolda, that's 1 and 3, because he's not referring to Se'es now, he's referring to 1 and 3. That's the one that goes with it. It's not quite as white. So the implication is that it's 1 and 3 that combine, and therefore 2 and 4 combine, and not 4 with 3, 3 with 2, and 2 with 1. So the Isa, and if you're going to tell me that if they combine, that 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 2 and 1, shall tsemer deha hemena mi, it should have referred to the wool color, because the wool color is the next one. That's what we say that the Se'es is. Again, if we take a look at on the screen, Se'es, white like wool, is the second of the different colors. So it should have said Se'es. So Amrei, the answer is Ein Hachinami. Actually, you're absolutely right. Not only should it have said reference to Se'es and to wool, but V'hatanya, we actually have a Baraisa that says that was what it really was, what the Mishnah was supposed to say. Rabbi Nassan Omer, Rabbi Nassan says regarding Rabbi Akiva's statement in the second Mishnah in Maseches Nagayim, Lo Shama Rabbi Akiva shel sid deha hemena. Rabbi Akiva did not, in fact, say that he was referring to the lime color, but rather Ela shel tsemer deha hemena. He was referring to the wool color, because he combines 1 with 2, 2 with 3, 3 with 4. And so as a result, we've now answered the question. What is the answer to the question? What was the question? Again, the question was, how do we know that Rabbi Akiva says that we combine 4 with 3, 3 with 2, and 2 with 1, and not like the first Mishnah in Maseches Nagayim, which says that you combine 1 with 3 and 2 with 4? Well, the answer is that we know that in fact based on the teaching of Rabbi Hanina, that the analogy is that we have 4 consecutive whites. And what about the second Mishnah in Negaim? The second Mishnah in Negaim, you have to read it like Rabbi Natan tells us, that it's referring to the Bahares and the Semer, which are the 2 that are next to each other. And so as a result, it's showing that Rabbi Akiva believes that you combine 1 with 2, not 1 with 3. And so as a result, we see that we combine 1 with 2 in connection with the Adam Dam situation, with the reddish hued situation. And so also we'll combine 1 with 2 and 2 with 3 and 3 with 4, also in the regular pure white situation. And so that shows that this Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Negaim, can't be like Rabbi Akiva. So now we've analyzed that. We're going to get back to the rabbi's view of combining 1 with 3 and 2 with 4 in a little bit, and we're going to get some analogies. But before we get there, we're now going to go through the different levels and start with Baharis, the most white, and how we know about it. Uminalan de Baharis azahi. How do I know that Baharis is the strongest of them all? Amar Abaye, Amar Kra, the im Baharis levanahi. If it's Baharis, it's white. So he levana, the einacharis levana, is reading it sort of like in a midrasha kind of way. That what is the one that's white? What is the one that everybody would consider the whitest white?
The whiteboard.
Exactly, the whiteboard behind me. It's the Baharis. So like white like snow. So Tanu Rabbanan. So now we're going to go through a brisa that goes through all the different colors. Baharis amuka. White is deep. And now this is not always so perfect, because I think people would say, if you look at the whiteboard behind me, that they would think that the whiteboard is in front of the wall, not behind the wall. But I think if we ignore it, if we take a look at shadows on the ground, and you say sort of which ground looks closer, the one that is that has the bright light, or the one that has the shadow, you would say that the bright light looks like it's coming from farther away, because it's brighter. And so as a result, you're going to say, the eye would say, oh, where does light come from? That is stronger. It must be coming from further away than the part that's right next to it, where there isn't as much light coming from. And so as a result, that's going to be umar'eha amok min ha'or. That's going to be deeper than the rest of the skin, because the rest of the skin is going to be darker than the white. And so as a result, it's going to look like the white part is the deepest. Just like the sunshine on the ground is deeper than the shade that's around it. Se'es, what about se'es? What does that mean? Ein se'es ela gavoa. That means that it's raised. So it's going to be, because if you compare it to Baharis, which is the whitest of the white, so then, you're going to say that the part that is less white looks like it's closer to you. And indeed, actually, if you think about it, at least maybe I'm just saying this because this is what the Gemara says, but I think if we take a look at the whiteboard behind me, at least in the reflection that I see on my screen, the white parts where you actually are seeing the reflection of the light look like they're further away than the dark parts that reflect the reflection of the non-light areas, even if everything looks white. V'chein hu omer, and this is what people say. How do I know that se'es means raised? Well, it's based on a pasuk in Yeshaya. So al kol haharim haramim v'al kol hagavaos hanisaos, that upon all the high mountains and upon all the raised up hills. So nisaos meaning raised up. Nisaos is similar to se'es, and so that shows that the word se'es means raised up. Sapachas, what does sapachas mean? Ain't sapachas ela tfela. Sapachas means like a subsidiary, namely a tolda. So v'chein hu omer v'amar svacheni na. After we always said svacheni na, annex me, please. This is a pasuk in where's this pasuk from? This is a pasuk from Shmuel Aleph. And so as a result, it is referring to where Eli Cohen wants that his children to still be part of the Kohanic service, and so he asked to be included. But in any event, the bottom line is that it refers to being an adjunct, being a secondary to. So Ashkechan Tfeila l'Seis. Well, that shows that that Seis has a secondary. Tfeil Baharis Minalan. How do I know that Baharis also has a secondary? Because the Torah says in Vayikra Yudalet Pasuk, this is again last week's Parsha, Pasuk Nun Vav, it says Vila Seis, Vila Sapachas. So that suggests that the Sapachas is for the Seis. So Amar Rebbe Zera, Nemra Levana V'Seis, V'Nemra Levana Baharis. Not, well, you can do some kind of Gzera Shava, that because the word Levana, white, appears both in connection with Seis, that's in Pasuk, Parak Yud Gimel, Pasuk Yud, and it appears with Baheres, that's Pasuk, Parak Yud Gimel, Pasuk Dalid. So, Ma Levana, Mark, they could use your help. Ma Levana ha'amura b'seis yesh la tfeila. So just as the Levana that's mentioned by Seis indicates that there's a secondary version, so too, in the second one, so too for Beheres, it means that there should also be a secondary one. So that's one way to learn it. In the Brisa, we learned it a different way. That actually in the Torah, in Vayikra Parak Yud Gimel Pasuk Bet, it put the word Sapakas between Seis and Beheres. And so as a result, it says Seis o Sapakas o Beheres. So that shows that it actually is the Sapakas on some level goes in both directions. It could go before it to the Seis, and it could go after it to the Beheres. And so as a result, that shows that there is a secondary for both Beheres and Seis. Okay, so Seis could say it Semra Lavan. We said that Seis was wool white. So what does that mean? So my Tzemer Lavan, what does that mean? Amar Rav Bibi, Amar Rav Asi, Tzemer Naki Ben Yomo, Shemechabdin Bo Lemelas, that this refers to the white, clean wool of a day-old lamb that has immediately, upon its birth and having it been cleaned off by its mother, has its wool fastened so that it can no longer get dirty, and that way you can use it for a beautiful woolen garment. So Amar Rabbi Chanina, Mashal de Rabbanan Lama Davar Domet. So we saw already Rabbi Chanina gave us an analogy for Rabbi Akiva's perspective. Now he's going to provide one for the rabbis, and then others are going to follow suit. So Mashal de Rabbanan Lama Davar Domet. To what is the comparable, the rabbi's view? The rabbi's view is that you combine Baheres with Sid, which is 1 and 3, and Seis with the membrane of the egg, and so Krumbetza. And so as a result, how can we think about that? So here is the first analogy. Lutre Malche, Lutre Iparche. It's like 2 kings and 2 governors. Malko Shelzeh, Malo Malko Shelzeh. One king is more important than the other king. Iparcho Shelzeh, Lamalo Iparcho Shelzeh. and one governor is more important than the other governor. Now, the problem with the way we just phrased that is that by comparing the kings and the governors, it sounds like that we should allow the kings to combine and we should allow the governors to combine. But that isn't what we really mean. So, but hi zelam alamizeh, bezelam alamizehu. That seems to be an approach where you combine the levels that are next to one another. That's like Rabbi Akiva. So rather say that what Rabbi Chanina really said was the following: Ella malko shel zeh l'malam iparche denafshe. Rather, note that the top level is going to be more important than the governor. So the king is more important than a governor. Umalko shozel amalami parko denashe. And the other king is going to be more important than his other governor. Meaning that the comparisons that we're making are between the king and his own governor, which is just like an Av and the Tolda, just like 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, not 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. And so that's that analogy. Rav Ada bar Abba Amar Kagon Malka v'al Kafta Rufila v'Reish Galusa. It's like a Malka and Al Kafta, a Rufilia and a Reish Galusa. So Rashi helps us out here. It's a little less than halfway down in the narrow lines. Looks like it's about 22, 23 lines down in the narrow lines on Vav Amabet. Malka ve'al Kafta, Shnei Malachim Heim. Both Malka and Al Kafta are both considered like kings. Umalka chashiv mi Al Kafta, but a Malka is a more important king than an Al Kafta. Rufilia, continuing on in Rashi. Iparchus, that's the governor. Shel Malka, that's the governor of the Malka level. V'Reish Galusa, Iparchus, Shel Al Kafta. And the Reish Galusa is essentially like the governor for the Al Kafta. So again, we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4. But you have quoted it in that order of 1, 2, 3, 4. So the Gemara asks, Hi zelam alamizehu. That's a comparison of one being greater than the next. That's like Rabbi Akiva. Right. If you quote things 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to think that it's 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, just like Rabbi Akiva. No, so rather what Rav Ada bar Abba was saying is Kigon Malka Rufila. It's like the king and the Rufila, which is the governor of the Malka, and Al Kafta v'Reish Galusa, and it's like the king, the lower king of Al Kafta with the Reish Galusa, which is the lowest kind of governor. Excuse me. So that is analogy number 2. Now we have analogy number 3. Rava Amar Kagon Shavur Malka the Kesar. No, it's like King Shapur and the the Caesar. So what is the meaning of that? How does that work? So let's take a look at Rashi. So okay, so Rashi says Shvor Malka. It's a few lines down from the last Rashi that we looked at. Melech Paras. The king, Shvor Malka refers to the king of Persia. The Kesar, Melech Romi, and Kesar refers to the king of Rome. The Kol Echad Yeshlo Iparchus, and each of them have their own governor. So Amar Le, so Rava says to, so Amar Le Rav Papa LaRava. So Rav Papa says to Rava, Heiminaihu Adif, which one is more significant? Is it the king of Persia or the king of Rome? So Amar Le, Rava says back to Rav Papa, are you eating in a forest? Meaning, where are you? What are you? Don't you just look out and you'll see. Go see which one's greater in the world. Dixiv, and the funny thing is that he says, go see which one is greater in the world, but then he ends up bringing a proof from a pasuk. So it's not actually going out and seeing in the world, but to go take a look at what the Tanakh says. But the Tanakh says, v'techul kol ara v'tudishina v'tadkina. That when it comes, this is from Daniel, Perek Zion Pasuk Kov Gimel, where Daniel says it shall devour the whole earth and tread upon it and break it into pieces. And what is this referring to? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says Zu Rumi Chayeves. This is the Rome that is liable for doing a lot of bad things. Shetiva Yotza B'chol Haolam Kulo, because its authority has gone out around the entire world. And so as a result, that's the situation. And so we end up with the king of Rome being on top, then the king of Persia, and then each of their respective governors. And again, the way it's been structured is that's the king Shapar with his governor and Caesar with his governor. And so as a result, that's the fulfillment of the analogy. Now,
they didn't know about China,
I'm sure not.
Which was even more powerful. And it was about that time that Rome started deprecating its currency, and its currency stopped being the worldwide standard.
Ah, all right. So warning for
that
today's
was probably a little bit
world.
Probably just a little bit later.
Yeah. But the bottom line seems to be is that everybody is trying to use an analogy that they feel will work with the community in which they're located. And so as a result, Rav Ada is focused on kings Al-Kata, Rufila, and Reish Galusa, and Rav is focused on King Shapar and Caesar. And Ravina offers the fourth and final situation. He suggests the following. It's Kagon Glima de Amar Vishachake, that it's sort of like a wool garment and a worn out version. Sedina de Kisna Vishachake, and it's like a linen garment and a worn out version. Again, this doesn't require any thoughts about royalty. The idea is that you have two versions of two separate things, even though the whiteness of a wool garment and the whiteness of a linen garment, I'm not sure which one is
It says here linen garment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out which one is considered which one is considered the most white. Is the most white the linen one, or is the most light the wool one? I would think that the most light is the linen one, and that we have the linen white is the highest. Then you have the wool white, and then you have the linen used, and then you have the wool used. But the idea is, the rabbi's analogy is that you only focus on the two that go together. So as a result, the linen and the worn out linen are going to go together, which is 1 and 3. And the wool and the worn out wool, which are 2 and 4, will also go together. And so that is how we can understand what the rabbis are saying when they say that that really it's 1 and 3 combined, 2 and 4 combined, but not the combination of Rabbi Akiva, which was 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 2 and 1. And so that brings us to the end of our discussion of Tzarat. And so now the Gemara is going to turn to knowledge of Tuma. Again, we had 4 different knowledges of Tuma that we saw them a little bit earlier. We talked a little bit about them before getting to Tzarat, but now we're going to go back into more detail, where the question is, whether you have knowledge of whether or not you're tameh, and then you eat something or go into the Beit HaMikdash, that's Kodesh. And then the alternative is where you know that you're tameh, but you go into an area and you don't realize that that area is either the Beis Hamikdash, or you eat something and you don't realize that that item is Kodesh. So that's what we're going to be turning to next. But for that discussion, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yes, thank you.
Yasher koach.
Baruch Tiyah,
I'm
thank you.
finding this difficult because having looked at snow and eggs and lime and wool, I don't see much difference.
Well, I think that's probably a lot of what that's probably intentional, meaning that
Yeah,
it's not supposed to be that different. It's you know, I'm definitely not one that would have been able to do that color kind of analysis.
yeah, I'd have to get a spectrometer to measure the
The whiteness.
intensity. It'd have to be a very carefully controlled experiment.
Yeah, yeah, 100% in order to, especially according to the Rabbanan, where you only combine 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, and you don't
Right.
combine the ones that are next to each other. It's
Rabbi
you
Akiva,
got to
yeah.
be very talented to be able to pull that
Yeah.
off.
All
So,
right. Thank
all
you.
right, Yishakach, have a great day. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.